They sat me by the bathroom door, under the yellow fluorescent lights. My stepfather's voice cut through the restaurant chatter. "Smile. Don't embarrass me." I didn't smile. His hand found my wrist in the narrow hallway, squeezing until bone met bone. Then came the slap quick, practiced, hidden from the dining room cameras. Tonight was their 10th anniversary celebration, and I was their prop, positioned perfectly where the smell of industrial sanitizer mixed with champagne. But I'd brought more than a forced smile to this party. The hair clip with its tiny microphone recorded everything. My name is Harper Lane, and I've been invisible in my own family for exactly 16 years since the day Richard Keene married my mother and brought his son Aiden into our Denver home. But tonight, at the Grandview restaurant downtown, that invisibility became a weapon. The hostess had seated me at table 14, pressed against the service corridor where waiters rushed past with loaded trays, and the bathroom door swung open every few minutes, releasing bursts of hand dryer noise. The main tables, where photographers circulated and champagne sparkled under crystal chandeliers, formed a golden circle 20 feet away. That's where Richard held court, his construction company logo subtly displayed on the anniversary cake. My mother, Joanna, glowing beside him in a dress that cost more than my monthly rent. "Harper, sweetie, could you just—" Mom had started to say when she saw my placement, but Richard's hand on her arm stopped her. The gesture looked gentle to observers. I knew better. "She's fine there," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Someone needs to greet the latecomers." Latecomers, to a reserved private event with a fixed guest list. I smoothed my dress, the modest navy one Richard had approved, not the emerald silk I'd originally chosen, and took my seat. Aiden swooped by, designer suit impeccable, his startup's latest investor trailing behind him. "Hey, sis," he said, that practiced casualness he'd perfected. "You look comfortable." His date, a blonde from his CrossFit gym, giggled. They moved on to the central tables where Richard was already positioning them for photos. The bathroom door opened again. Antiseptic smell, fluorescent flicker, the mechanical roar of the hand dryer. I counted 7 times in the first 20 minutes. My water glass remained empty while champagne flowed freely at the main tables. "Excuse me." A server finally appeared, looking harried. "Could you move your chair in? We need to get through with the cake cart." I shifted closer to the wall, my knee now hitting the table leg. Through the service corridor's swinging doors, I glimpsed the kitchen's harsh white light, heard the clatter of dishes. This was deliberate, calculated Richard's specialty, never obvious enough to call abuse, always deniable. "She's so sensitive," he'd say if I complained. "We found her a perfectly good seat." 9:43 p.m. Richard's voice boomed across the room. "Where's Harper? Harper, come here for the family photo." I stood, navigated through the maze of chairs. The photographer had already arranged everyone Richard center, my mother adoringly at his side, Aiden positioned prominently. They'd left a space for me at the far end, partially hidden behind Aiden's girlfriend. "Smile," Richard commanded as I took my place. His hand gripped my shoulder, fingers pressing into the muscle. "Bigger. You're ruining the shot with that face." The photographer clicked away. "Beautiful family," he said. "One more. Miss, could you smile?" Richard's fingers tightened. "Harper, smile." I kept my expression neutral, professional, the same face I wore at Horizon Stone Advisors when clients screamed about portfolio losses. Not defiant, just unmoved. "We'll take 5, Richard announced to the photographer, his voice still jovial. His hand moved to my elbow. "Harper, a word." He steered me toward the service corridor, past the bathroom, into the narrow hallway where the emergency exit sign cast everything in red. The sounds of the party dimmed. Here, between stacked chairs and a broken ice machine, we were invisible to the guests. "You ungrateful," he caught himself, lowered his voice. "I spend $15,000 on this event, and you can't manage a simple smile. Your mother deserves better." "My mother deserves the truth about the Riverside Trust Fund," I said quietly. His face changed then, the mask slipping. His hand shot out, grabbed my wrist, twisted. "You know nothing about—" "I know enough." The slap came fast, practiced, efficient, the way he'd learned to do it where bruises wouldn't show in photographs. My face snapped sideways. I tasted copper. "Smile," he said again, releasing my wrist. "Go back out there and smile, or I'll make sure your mother knows exactly how selfish her daughter really is. How you're trying to destroy her happiness because you're jealous of Aiden's success." He walked back to the party, adjusting his cuffs. I stood in the red emergency light, my cheek burning, and touched the decorative hair clip I'd bought 3 weeks ago, the one with the micro recorder that had captured everything, including his confession about the trust fund he thought I didn't understand. I returned to table 14. The bathroom door opened again 11 times now. The hand dryer roared. I sat in my assigned seat by the service corridor, touched my cheek where tomorrow a bruise would bloom, and made a decision. No more silence. No more invisible suffering. Richard Keene had just made his last mistake. I took out my phone and typed a message to Mavis O'Connell, the lawyer I'd consulted last month. "I have what we need, the recording is clear." Her response came within seconds. "Stay safe. Document everything. We move Monday." At the main table, Richard raised his champagne glass for another toast to his perfect marriage, his perfect family. The room applauded. My mother smiled. Aiden laughed at something his investor said, and I sat by the bathroom door, finally understanding that sometimes the best view of the fire is from outside the burning house. The first time Richard showed his true colors, I was 18 and had just received my acceptance letter to Colorado State. Full scholarship. I'd worked 3 jobs through high school coffee shop at 5:30 a.m., tutoring after school, weekend shifts at Target. My father's life insurance had run out 2 years after his accident, right when Mom met Richard at some charity gala. "Harper's so independent," Mom had gushed to Richard that night at dinner, holding my acceptance letter. "She's never needed help with anything." "Unlike Aiden," Richard said, cutting his steak with precision. "Artists need support. His vision for the gallery requires investment." The gallery failed within 6 months. Then came the app development company, the food truck, the cryptocurrency consulting firm, each venture funded by family resources that somehow never extended to my textbooks or meal plans. I ate ramen in my dorm while Aiden posted Instagram photos from Aspen, but the financial discrimination was just the surface. The real manipulation ran deeper. "You're not coming home for Thanksgiving?" Mom had asked during my sophomore year, her voice carefully neutral over the phone. "I have to work. Black Friday shifts pay triple. Richard says you're being dramatic, that you're punishing me for finding happiness." "Mom, I asked if you could help with my spring tuition payment. Just $500. You spent $8,000 on Aiden's business workshop in Cabo." Silence. Then, "Aiden's struggling. You've always been strong. Strong. Independent. Self-sufficient." The words they used to justify everything. By 25. I'd clawed my way into Horizon Stone Advisors, starting as an assistant and working up to portfolio management. I lived in a studio apartment in Capitol Hill, saved obsessively, built my own stability. Meanwhile, Aiden moved back home after his 5th failed venture, and Richard bought him a Tesla for motivation. The documentation started accidentally. I'd been helping Mom with her computer she needed TurboTax installed when I noticed strange transfers in her bank statements. 50,000 here, 30,000 there, all marked family investment. The dates matched Aiden's various launches perfectly. "Mom," I'd said carefully, "are these loans? Is Aiden paying you back?" She'd looked uncomfortable. "Richard handles the finances. He says it's better for taxes this way." That night, I started taking photos. Every statement I could find, every receipt, every email where Richard discussed restructuring assets or optimizing family wealth. The pattern became clear. Richard was systematically moving my mother's inheritance from my grandmother into accounts and properties where he had control. The physical intimidation evolved too. Never hitting, not at first. Just positioning. Standing too close when he disagreed with me. Blocking doorways during arguments. Gripping my arm to guide me at family events. Fingers digging in just enough to hurt. "You're imagining things," Mom said when I showed her the bruises on my wrist from last Christmas. "You've always bruised easily. Richard would never. He loves this family." The gaslighting was surgical. Every confrontation became my fault. I was jealous. I was bitter. I was trying to destroy Mom's happiness because I couldn't stand seeing her loved after Dad died. Richard would deliver these diagnoses calmly, sadly, like a disappointed father figure, while Mom nodded along. 3 months ago, everything escalated. I'd discovered that Richard had convinced Mom to refinance her mortgage, the house Dad had nearly paid off before his death, and add Richard as co-owner. The equity loan funded Aiden's latest venture, a revolutionary social media platform for extreme sports enthusiasts. "That's fraud," I'd told Richard directly, catching him alone in his home office. "You manipulated her into signing those papers." He'd stood up slowly, walked around to the desk. "Your mother is a grown woman who makes her own choices. But you're a vindictive child who can't accept that she chose me over your father's memory. My father would have protected her from parasites like you." That's when he grabbed my throat. Not squeezing, just holding. A reminder. "Careful, Harper. Your mother's health is fragile. Imagine how stress might affect her. Imagine if she had to choose between her daughter and her happiness." I'd started recording everything after that. Colorado is a one-party consent state. I could legally record conversations I was part of. The hair clip with its tiny microphone was just the latest tool. I had videos from my phone, audio files backed up to 3 different clouds, photos of every financial document I could access. Last week, I'd found the smoking gun, a trust fund my grandmother had specifically designated for me, dissolved and transferred to a new account in Richard and Mom's names, with Aiden listed as primary beneficiary upon their deaths. The paperwork was dated 3 days after Mom's minor surgery last year, when she was still hazy from pain medication. "You're building a case," Mavis O'Connell had said when I'd brought her everything. "But you need current documentation of abuse. Juries sympathize with recent victims, not historical ones." So I'd waited, planned, known that Richard's ego would provide the opportunity. His anniversary party, his chance to parade his perfect family before Denver's elite, was the perfect stage. Now, sitting in my apartment at 2:15 a.m., uploading the audio file from tonight to my lawyer's secure server, I felt the weight of 16 years lifting. The slap still burned on my cheek. Good. Let it bruise. Let it be photographed. Richard thought he'd broken me by that bathroom door. He didn't realize he'd just signed his own confession. Monday morning at 8:45 a.m. I sat in Mavis O'Connell's office overlooking the Denver Tech Center, spreading documents across her conference table like evidence at a crime scene, which, technically, they were. "This trust fund dissolution," Mavis said, adjusting her reading glasses, "happened while your mother was on oxycodone. Post-operative, I have her pharmacy records and the hospital discharge papers with the medication timeline." I placed the receipts next to the trust documents. "The notary who witnessed her signature, Richard's golf buddy, owns a title company that's done 12 transactions for Richard's construction business." Mavis made notes in her sharp, precise handwriting. "And these transfers to Aiden's companies, shell corporations, mostly. Look." I pulled up the Colorado Secretary of State website on my laptop. Apex Ventures LLC, registered to Aiden Keene, received $80,000 in consulting fees from RK Construction, Richard's company. RK Construction was simultaneously billing my mother's investment account for property management services on rental properties she doesn't own. Money laundering. Or tax fraud, maybe both. But here's the interesting part. I opened another folder. "I work in portfolio management. I know how to read financial patterns. Richard's been structuring these transfers to stay just under IRS reporting thresholds. 10,000 here, 9,500 there, Classic structuring behavior. Mavis leaned back, tapping her pen against her legal pad. The physical abuse, you have the audio from Saturday night. I connected my phone, played the recording. Richard's voice filled the office, the grip, the slap, the threats about my mother's fragile health. Mavis's expression darkened with each second. I also have photos, I said, showing her my cheek, now purple-yellow despite concealer. And there's a witness. My Aunt Sylvie was in the restroom. She heard the slap, saw me afterward. Will she testify? She's been waiting 20 years for someone to stand up to Richard. She's already written her statement. Mavis stood, pacing to the window. We have 3 parallel approaches here. Criminal assault charges that's straightforward with your recording and witness. Financial elder abuse and fraud more complex but devastating if proven. And the emergency protective order to prevent asset transfers while we investigate. There's a timeline issue, I said. Richard's planning something. I found this in Mom's email. I showed her a forward from Richard to his lawyer about estate planning updates scheduled for next week. He's accelerating because he knows you're on to him. Possibly, or because Mom's been having heart palpitations. She thinks it's stress. I think Richard's creating the stress deliberately. Mavis returned to the table. Harper, I need to be clear about something. Once we start this, Richard will retaliate. He'll turn your mother against you completely. Aiden will play victim. Their social circle will close ranks. You could lose your family. I lost them the day Richard arrived. I'm just making it official. She studied me for a long moment. There's something else you should know. I did some checking after your initial consultation. Richard Keene. This isn't his first marriage where assets mysteriously shifted to his control. His first wife in Colorado Springs died of a heart attack 3 years into their marriage, left everything to him. Her adult children contested but couldn't prove anything. My blood chilled. You think I think patterns matter in law, and Richard Keene has a pattern. We spent the next 3 hours building the strategy. File the assault charges first clean, documented, indisputable. Use that as leverage for the protective order. Then, unleash the financial investigation while Richard was dealing with criminal charges. But here's the real knife twist, Mavis said, pulling up her calendar. Richard's got that big charity gala next month, the one his construction company sponsors. The Denver Children's Foundation event. It's his crown jewel. All his investors attend. Perfect. We time the financial fraud filing for the week before. Let the Denver Post pick it up. Let his reputation crumble while everyone's watching. That seems vengeful. Mavis smiled, sharp as winter. Harper, he's been destroying you slowly for 16 years. We're just returning the favor efficiently. At noon, we walked to the Denver Police Department. I filed the assault report, provided the audio, showed my bruises to the officer who photographed them with clinical detachment. Sylvie met us there, gave her witness statement. The detective, a woman with tired eyes who'd clearly seen too much, listened to the recording twice. We can arrest him today, she said, or you can wait. Let us build more evidence. There's an event, I said. A charity gala in 3 weeks. His biggest investors will be there. The detective exchanged glances with Mavis. You want it public? I want it undeniable. She nodded slowly. We can work with that, but Harper men like this, when cornered, they get dangerous. You need to be careful. That afternoon, I went to the bank, opened new accounts Richard couldn't trace, moved my savings, changed my direct deposits, cut every financial tie that could be weaponized. At 4:30 p.m., my phone rang. Mom, Harper, Richard told me you threatened him Saturday night, that you're trying to destroy our family because you're jealous. Is this true? I sat in my car outside the bank, watching downtown Denver shimmer in the afternoon heat. Mom, did Richard also tell you he hit me? Silence. Then, you've always been dramatic. I have audio recording, Mom, and photos, and a witness. You recorded private conversations. Harper, that's illegal. Not in Colorado. One-party consent. I learned that from Richard, actually. He mentioned it when bragging about recording his construction workers. She was crying now. Why are you doing this? We were happy. I was happy. Were you happy? Mom? Or were you just afraid of being alone? You don't understand what it's like, losing someone you love. I lost Dad too, but I didn't let his memory be sold to the highest bidder. She hung up. That night, I sat in my apartment, doors locked, security system armed. The hair clip recorder sat on my coffee table next to printed emails, bank statements, photos, evidence of a war I never wanted but couldn't afford to lose. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You have no idea what you've started. Then another, your mother's heart condition is very serious. Stress could kill her. Think about that. I screenshotted both, forwarded them to Mavis and the detective. The battle lines were drawn. Richard thought he was fighting the same scared 18-year-old he'd first intimidated. He was about to learn what 16 years of silent observation and careful planning could accomplish. The surveillance equipment arrived Tuesday afternoon in an unmarked Amazon box. 2 pen cameras, another hair clip recorder, and a phone case with built-in audio capture. All legal in Colorado, all invisible to casual observation. I spent 3 hours practicing with them in my apartment, learning the angles, testing the audio quality. You're building a mosaic, Mavis had advised. Every piece of evidence is a tile. We need enough tiles to show the complete picture. Wednesday, I recruited my first inside ally, Marcus Chin, no relation, despite the name-managed events at the Grand Hyatt where Richard's gala would be held. We'd gone to college together. He'd seen me working 3 jobs while Aiden posted spring break photos from Cancun. I need the camera blind spots for the ballroom, I told him over coffee and Lodo. And the AV system access codes? Marcus stirred his cappuccino thoughtfully. This is about Richard Keene. That man's been a nightmare for our staff. Demands, threats, never tips. What are you planning? Justice, with a side of public humiliation. He smiled. The AV system runs through a central iPad. I'll make sure you're listed as an authorized user for family slideshow purposes. The security cameras. There's a dead zone near the service elevator, another by the emergency exit. But Harper, the main ballroom has 3 cameras, all recording. Perfect. I want everything on record. That evening, I met Aunt Sylvie at her house in Wash Park. She poured wine with shaking hands. Your mother called me, she said. Told me to stop filling your head with lies about Richard. What did you tell her? That I've been watching him isolate and manipulate her for 16 years. That I saw what he did at the restaurant. That I'm done being silent. She pulled out a folder. I've been keeping my own records. Every time Joanna canceled plans because Richard wouldn't approve. Every bruise she explained away. Every time her stories didn't add up. Mom had bruises. Small ones, arms, shoulders, places covered by clothing. She said she was clumsy, but Joanna was a dancer in college. She's never been clumsy. I photographed every page of Sylvie's records. Dates, incidents, observations, more tiles for the mosaic. Thursday brought escalation. Richard showed up at Horizon Stone Advisors at lunch, all smiles and concern. Harper, he said loudly enough for the entire office to hear. I wanted to apologize about Saturday. Family stress. You understand. Your mother's worried about you. I kept my voice equally public. Is that why you hit me, Richard family stress? The office went silent. Richard's mask slipped for just a second, fury flashing before the concerned stepfather returned. You're clearly going through something. Maybe you should take some time off. Mental health is so important. My mental health improved dramatically when I started documenting financial fraud. He stepped closer. My hand moved to the pen camera clipped to my blazer. Careful, little girl. You don't know who you're playing with. Actually, I do. Did you know your lawyer, Davidson, was disbarred in Wyoming before moving to Colorado? Interesting oversight in your hiring process. Securities fraud had taught me research skills. Richard had taught me to use them as weapons. He left, but the damage was intentional. By afternoon, HR had called me in. Mr. Keene expressed concern about your stability, the director said carefully. He mentioned you've been making accusations, possibly stalking his family. I placed my phone on the desk, played the audio from Saturday night. The slap echoed in the corporate conference room. I'm filing criminal charges, I said. My stepfather is attempting to discredit me professionally before his arrest. I'd appreciate Horizon Stone's support, not participation in his intimidation tactics. HR backed down immediately. Corporate liability was a beautiful thing. Friday. I went shopping for the gala, not for a dress for a very specific phone, one that could stream directly to cloud storage, that could be activated remotely. That looked identical to Richard's model. The phone store clerk didn't ask questions about my cash payment. Planting evidence is illegal, Mavis warned when I told her. I'm not planting anything. I'm just going to accidentally swap phones when Richard sets his down, for maybe 10 minutes, long enough to export some interesting data. I didn't hear that. Hear what? Saturday, a week after the anniversary slap. I drove past my mother's house, my childhood home. Richard's Mercedes sat in the driveway next to Aiden's Tesla. Through the kitchen window, I could see them having dinner. The family I'd been erased from. My phone rang. Unknown number. You cost me a contract today. Richard's voice, controlled fury. Davidson told me about Wyoming. That was a mistake. Harper. So was hitting me in front of witnesses. Your aunt's a drunk. No one will believe her. Sylvie's been sober for 12 years. Try again. Your mother's heart is being stressed by living with an abusive criminal. I'm trying to save her life. He hung up. Sunday morning, 2 weeks before the gala, I met with Detective Sarah Chen again. No relation. Denver was full of Chens who'd been assigned my case. We've been watching Richard, she said. He's been moving money. Lots of it. Trying to hide assets. He knows what's coming. He also hired a private investigator, former cop named Briggs. He's been following you. I thought about the sedan I'd noticed twice this week. Good. Let him see me living my normal life while Richard panics. Harper, this kind of man, when cornered, gets dangerous. I know. But he's not cornered yet. He still thinks he can win. That ego will be his downfall. She showed me photos. We found something interesting. Richard's first wife. We pulled the autopsy records. The heart attack. There were unusual markers. Nothing definitive then. But with modern toxicology knowledge. She paused. We're exhuming the body. The room spun slightly. You think he murdered her. I think Richard Keene has been playing a long game for decades. You might be the first person to call his bluff and survive. That afternoon, I updated my will. Everything to Sylvie and a domestic violence charity. Nothing for the family that had already written me off. The pen camera clicked softly as I signed the documents. Another tile in the mosaic. Another piece of evidence that I'd fought back. 2 weeks until the gala. 2 weeks to finish what Richard had started 16 years ago. I touched the fading bruise on my cheek, my war paint. My evidence. My reminder that survival sometimes requires burning down the house you grew up in. The preparation phase was complete. Now came the dangerous part, letting Richard think he was winning while I assembled the final pieces. He thought he was the predator and I was prey. He was about to learn that sometimes prey grows teeth. The Denver Children's Foundation Gala arrived on a Thursday evening that threatened snow. 7:45 p.m. I stood outside the Grand Hyatt in a black cocktail dress, not the approved navy Richard had selected for me, but something that said I was done taking orders. The pen camera was clipped to my clutch, the hair recorder woven into my updo, my phone, fully charged, ready to capture what would become Richard's final performance. Inside, the ballroom sparkled with false warmth, ice sculptures, champagne fountains, and Denver's elite pretending their donations weren't tax write-offs. Richard held court near the main stage, my mother glittering beside him in diamonds that had once belonged to my grandmother. Aiden worked the younger crowd, his latest investor pitch disguised as casual conversation. Marcus had delivered perfectly. My name was on the seating chart table 23, by the service entrance again. But more importantly, I had AV access on the iPad hidden in my clutch. Harper. My mother intercepted me near the coat check, her voice strained. You came. Richard didn't tell you he'd uninvited me. Her face flickered with confusion. He said you were going through something, that you needed space. I need a lot of things. Mom, space from abuse is definitely one of them. She gripped my arm, her nails digging in. Stop this. Whatever you're planning. Stop. You don't understand what you're risking. Your heart condition. I kept my voice gentle. The one that started right after you signed over the trust fund. Interesting timing. She released me like I'd burned her. You're sick, Harper. Richard was right. You need help. 8:15 p.m. I took my assigned seat by the service entrance. The kitchen noise and cold drafts my companions. But this time, I welcomed the position. It gave me a clear view of the room while keeping me in shadow. I could see Richard's table, the stage, the screens that would soon display tonight's family tribute slideshow. Detective Sarah Martinez. I'd learned her last name wasn't Chen after all sat 3 tables away, dressed like any other donor. 2 uniformed officers waited in the lobby, out of sight but ready. Mavis was at the bar, ostensibly networking but actually documenting everything. 8:42 p.m. Richard started his rounds, working the room with practiced charm. When he reached my exile table, his smile turned predatory. Harper, so glad you could make it despite your troubles. Wouldn't miss it. Richard, it's going to be a memorable evening. He leaned down, his cologne overwhelming. Last chance. Apologize to your mother. Admit you've been unstable. Get help. Or lose everything. I already lost everything. 16 years ago. Now I'm just returning the favor. His hand shot out, grabbed my wrist under the table. The pen camera caught it all. You stupid little Mr. Keene. A server appeared. They're ready for your speech. He released me, straightened his tie. We'll finish this later. 9:10 p.m. Richard took the stage. The lights dimmed, spotlight on his commanding presence. My phone connected to the AV system, fingers poised over the upload button Marcus had prepared. Tonight, Richard began, we celebrate family, community, and the power of giving back. My beautiful wife Joanna and I have been blessed with 2 wonderful children. 2, not 3. I wasn't even worth mentioning in his script, and we want to share that blessing with Denver's children in need. Applause. I waited until he was mid-sentence about corporate responsibility, then triggered the upload. The screens behind him flickered. Richard continued, unaware, as the first image appeared, a photo of him at the anniversary dinner, hand raised mid-slap. My face turned away, the timestamp clearly visible. The room murmured. Richard glanced back, saw the image, and froze. The audio began playing through the ballroom's speaker system, his voice crystal clear. You ungrateful, I'll make sure your mother knows exactly how selfish her daughter really is. Then the sound of the slap, amplified across 300 guests. Next slide bank statements showing the systematic draining of my mother's accounts. Arrows pointing to transfers labeled Aiden's 5th failed business and Richard's personal account. Richard grabbed the microphone. This is someone's hacked. But the slides kept coming. The trust fund dissolution documents with my mother's shaky signature. Medical records showing her oxycodone prescription. The notary's connection to Richard's business. Then, the coup de grace and email Richard had sent to Davidson. His disbarred lawyer, need the rest of Joanna's assets transferred before her next cardiac episode. She won't last much longer with the increased medication. The ballroom erupted. My mother stood, swaying, staring at the screen. Richard, what medication? He was moving now, pushing through the crowd toward the AV booth. But Detective Martinez was faster. Badge out, voice carrying. Richard Keene, you're under arrest for assault, financial elder abuse, and suspected attempted murder. The uniforms entered from the lobby. Richard tried to run toward the service exit, straight toward my table. I stood, blocking his path. You destroyed everything, He snarled, spittle flying. No, Richard, I documented everything. You destroyed yourself. He raised his fist. 300 phones rose to record. He stopped, realizing he was surrounded by witnesses, cameras, and law enforcement. The handcuffs clicked with satisfying finality. Aiden was screaming about defamation, threats of lawsuits, but the financial records were undeniable. His investor was already on his phone, likely calling lawyers. My mother collapsed into a chair, Sylvie rushing to her side. Real concern, not manufactured drama. I wanted to go to her, but I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Ms. Lane. A reporter had appeared, Denver Post credentials visible. Can you comment on tonight's events? My name is Harper Lane, I said, loud enough for the room to hear. For 16 years, I've been systematically abused, erased, and stolen from by Richard Keene. Tonight, I chose to stop being silent. Domestic abuse thrives in shadow. Financial abuse depends on shame. I refuse to give them either anymore. Richard was being led out, past the ice sculptures and champagne fountains, past the donors who'd never do business with him again. He turned back once, eyes promising retribution. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had won. Not because I'd destroyed him, he'd done that himself, but because I'd finally stopped letting him destroy me. The screens still cycled through evidence. My mother's sobs echoed through the ballroom. The party was over, the masks were off, and I stood by the service entrance no longer exiled but exactly where I'd chosen to be. The bathroom door nearby swung open, that familiar antiseptic smell and fluorescent flicker. But this time, it didn't symbolize my humiliation. It reminded me that I'd survived. The ballroom had descended into controlled chaos. 300 of Denver's elite stood frozen, their phones still recording as the screens continued their relentless cycle. Bank statements, medical records, that damning email about my mother's cardiac episode. Each slide was a nail in Richard's coffin. But I wasn't done building yet. Marcus appeared at my elbow, iPad in hand. The main presentation system is locked on your upload. It'll cycle for another 10 minutes unless someone cuts power to the whole ballroom. Let it run. Behind Richard's arrest scene, the screen showed a new document property transfers dating back 3 years. Every asset my mother had inherited from my grandmother now bearing Richard's name. The crowd gasped collectively when they saw the total $4.7 million. That's my grandmother's money. My mother's voice cracked across the ballroom. She stood near the stage, Sylvie supporting her, facing the screens with dawning horror. Richard told me it was for tax purposes. He said it would protect the family. The next slide answered her Richard's secret account in the Caymans, fed by monthly transfers from RK Construction Consulting money that traced directly back to her inheritance. The Denver Post reporter had been joined by 3 others, including a local news crew that had somehow materialized within minutes. They surrounded my mother, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Mrs. Keene, did you know about your husband's financial activities? Were you aware of the assault on your daughter? How long has the abuse been happening? Joanna looked lost, her perfect makeup running, the diamonds at her throat like a collar she couldn't remove. I need to back off. Sylvie pushed through the reporters, shielding my mother. She's a victim here too. But the screens weren't done. The final sequence began audio recordings I'd collected over 2 years. Richard's voice filled the ballroom. Joanna's too medicated to notice the transfers. Harper's nothing. Background noise. Focus on Aiden. Once Joanna's gone, everything defaults to me. The prenup was worthless after the refinancing. That last one made my mother stagger. Gone. What does he mean, gone? Detective Martinez stepped forward, notebook out. Mrs. Lane, we need to discuss your medication. Our investigation suggests your husband has been deliberately poisoning her. The words came from Dr. Elizabeth Harmon, my mother's cardiologist, who'd been attending the gala. She pushed through the crowd, face pale. Joanna, I need to see you immediately. If Richard's been altering your medication. The pieces were clicking together publicly now, the mosaic revealing its full picture. Several of Richard's construction investors were already on their phones, likely calling lawyers. One man, Peterson, who'd funded Aiden's latest venture, was shouting at Aiden near the bar. You knew you had to know what your father was doing. Aiden, for once, had no smooth response. He stood there in his designer suit, watching his carefully constructed world crumble. I didn't, he said it was family money. He said Harper was lying, that she was jealous. Jealous. I walked toward him, the crowd parting like water. The pen camera caught every step. I worked 3 jobs through high school while you got a Mercedes for failing sophomore year. I ate ramen while you went to Aspen. I earned every penny while you burned through my grandmother's legacy. What exactly would I be jealous of? You always resented us, he said weakly. Dad said, Richard isn't your dad. He's a con artist who saw a wealthy widow and played the long game. And you were his willing accomplice. The screens shifted to one final document, a contract between Aiden and Richard, dated 6 months ago, outlining the distribution of Joanna Lane's assets upon her incapacitation or death. Aiden's signature bold at the bottom. The room exploded. Aiden tried to run, but 2 more officers had arrived. As they cuffed him, he screamed. It was all Richard. He made me sign I didn't know. But I had one more recording, Aiden's voice, from a conversation I'd captured at a family dinner. Once your mom's heart gives out, we'll split everything. Harper gets nothing. She was never really family anyway. My mother collapsed completely then. Dr. Harmon and Sylvie catching her. The paramedics who'd been standing by rushed in with a stretcher. As they prepared to transport her, she looked at me across the chaos, eyes searching for something forgiveness, understanding, anything. I'm sorry, she mouthed. I couldn't respond. 16 years of betrayal didn't disappear with 2 words. The news crew turned to me, cameras rolling. Ms. Lane, this appears to be an elaborate sting operation. How long have you been planning this? Since the night Richard Keene slapped me for not smiling enough at his anniversary party. But really, I've been collecting evidence since I realized my mother chose her comfort over my safety. That's quite an accusation. That's a documented fact. Every time she looked away when Richard grabbed me. Every Christmas she let him exile me to the table by the kitchen. Every birthday that was forgotten because Aiden needed attention. Abuse isn't just what someone does, it's what everyone else allows. The screens finally went dark, but the damage was complete. Richard's reputation, his business, his freedom all gone in 12 minutes of automated presentation. The Denver Children's Foundation director was already at the microphone, announcing that all donations from RK Construction would be returned and that the foundation had no knowledge of Mr. Keene's activities. Mavis appeared at my side. The emergency asset freeze just went through. Every account, every property, all frozen pending investigation. Your mother's inheritance is protected. What about her health? Dr. Harmon will run tests. If Richard was poisoning her, they'll find it. Attempted murder charges would add decades to his sentence. Around us, the gala was dissolving. Guests fled toward exits, afraid of guilt by association. The ice sculptures stood as witnesses to Denver High Society's most spectacular downfall. Harper. Marcus touched my shoulder gently. Security needs to clear the ballroom, but I saved the whole presentation. Every slide, every recording, just in case you need copies for court. Thank you. As I walked toward the exit, past the ruins of Richard's empire, I heard one society matron whisper to another, I always knew something was off about him, the way he treated that poor girl. Revisionist history was already beginning. By tomorrow, everyone would claim they'd seen the signs. But tonight, in this moment, the truth was undeniable and preserved in hundreds of phone recordings. At the door, I turned back once. The ballroom looked like a crime scene, overturned chairs, abandoned champagne. the stage where Richard had started his final speech still lit by a single spotlight. This was where my family's false portrait finally shattered. Where 16 years of being erased, diminished, and abused had led to absolute destruction. And I felt nothing but relief. The Grand Hyatt's marble lobby had transformed into an impromptu courthouse. Mavis stood at a makeshift desk, papers spread across the concierge counter, while Detective Martinez coordinated with arriving officers. The emergency response team had been waiting every detail orchestrated as carefully as Richard's financial schemes. "Ms. Lane," Detective Martinez waved me over, her notebook already filling with witness statements. "I need you to formally submit all evidence. The USB drives, the recordings, everything." I handed over 3 sealed USBs from my clutch. These contain 2 years of documentation, financial records, audio files, photographs. Everything's backed up on 3 cloud servers, and my attorney has copies. Mavis interrupted, phone pressed to her ear. "Judge Harrison just signed the emergency protective order." "Harper, you're now legally protected from any contact with Richard or Aiden. The asset freeze is comprehensive. They can't access a penny." Through the lobby windows, I could see Richard in the back of a police cruiser, his face illuminated by emergency lights. For the first time in 16 years, he looked small, powerless. Exactly how he'd made me feel. "There's more," Detective Martinez said quietly, pulling me aside. "We just got word from the forensics team. They found something at your mother's house, a second set of medication bottles hidden in Richard's office. The pills look identical to her prescribed heart medication, but the lab will confirm what they actually are. He was switching them. That's what we suspect. Your mother's doctor is running blood tests now. If we can prove poisoning, this becomes attempted murder, with his first wife's exhumation already authorized." She didn't need to finish. Richard might never see freedom again. The lobby doors burst open. Aiden, in handcuffs, was being escorted through. He saw me and lunged forward, officers restraining him. "You destroyed everything our family, our business, your family." I stepped closer, letting him see my calm. "I was never part of your family. I was the inconvenient reminder of the life that existed before your father's con game." It wasn't a con. He loved Mom. He loved her money. The emails prove it. "Aiden, you signed documents planning for her death. That's conspiracy to commit murder." His face went white. "I want a lawyer." "Davidson, your father's disbarred friend. Good luck with that." As they dragged him away, news crews pushed through the doors. The story was already breaking. "Denver construction mogul arrested at charity gala" scrolled across phone screens. By morning, it would be national news. Mavis gathered documents with surgical precision. "Harper, we need to file the civil suits tonight. Financial elder abuse, fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The criminal charges will proceed separately, but we want to ensure your mother's assets are protected and recovered. What about my inheritance the trust fund grandmother left me? We'll petition for full restoration plus damages. Given the evidence, I'd say Richard will be paying you restitution for the rest of his incarcerated life." A commotion near the elevators caught our attention. My mother, on a stretcher, was being wheeled toward an ambulance. "Doctor." Harmon walked beside her, face grim. She saw me and beckoned. "Your mother's asking for you." I hesitated. 16 years of betrayal stood between us like a wall of ice. "She may have been a victim too," Dr. Harmon said softly. "The preliminary blood tests show irregularities consistent with digitalis poisoning, small doses, over time, enough to cause symptoms, not enough to kill quickly." I approached the stretcher. My mother looked fragile, aged a decade in an hour. The diamonds were gone, the perfect makeup destroyed, leaving just a woman who'd chosen comfort over truth until the truth nearly killed her. "Harper," she whispered, reaching out. I didn't take her hand. "Did you know any of it?" "I suspected, but I was scared. After your father died, I felt so alone. Richard seemed like salvation." He seemed like money and security, and you traded me for it. Tears ran down her cheeks. I'm sorry. God, Harper, I'm so sorry. When I saw those documents, heard those recordings, I realized what I'd let happen, what I'd chosen not to see. Your apology doesn't erase 16 years. Mom, it doesn't undo every slap I took, every dinner where I was seated by the kitchen, every time you chose them over me. I know. I don't expect forgiveness. I wanted you to know that I see it now. All of it. The paramedics needed to leave. As they lifted her into the ambulance, she said one more thing. The house deed. Check the safe. Your father left something Richard never found. Then she was gone. Sirens wailing into the Denver night. Sylvie appeared, wrapping an arm around me. You did it, honey. You actually did it. It doesn't feel like victory. Victory rarely does when it costs you everything. Back in the lobby, the legal machinery was in full motion. Witnesses gave statements. The Denver Children's Foundation director signed forms confirming they would cooperate fully with the investigation. Richard's investors huddled with their lawyers, distancing themselves from the scandal. At 11:45 p.m., Judge Harrison arrived personally, unprecedented for such a late hour. She set up in the hotel's conference room, ready to sign whatever emergency orders were needed. Ms. Lane, she said, reviewing the evidence Mavis presented. In 30 years on the bench, I've rarely seen documentation this thorough. You built an airtight case. I had 16 years to prepare, Your Honor. She signed order after order. Asset freeze. Protective orders. Emergency conservatorship of my mother's finances transferred to Sylvie and me jointly. Preliminary restoration of my grandmother's trust fund. There's one more thing, the judge said. Given the evidence of long-term abuse and financial fraud, I'm ordering an immediate audit of all RK construction projects involving city contracts, if Richard was this corrupt in his personal life. The implications rippled outward. Every building, every contract, every deal Richard had touched would be scrutinized. His empire wasn't just ending, it was being erased. As midnight approached, the lobby finally began to empty. Police cars departed. News vans packed up for the 11 o'clock broadcasts. The Grant Hyatt staff started cleaning up the abandoned gala upstairs. I stood outside in the cold Denver air, watching Richard's world disappear piece by piece. Mavis joined me, satisfaction evident despite her professional demeanor. Your case will be studied in law schools, she said. The preparation, the execution, the timing textbook perfect. It had to be. I only had one shot. A text lit up my phone. Marcus, from inside, saved all the security footage too. Multiple angles of Richard's face when he realized what was happening. For your records. For my records. Because even now, even with him arrested and Aiden in custody, I was still collecting evidence. Still building the case. The hypervigilance of 16 years wouldn't disappear overnight. What now? Sylvie asked, joining us on the sidewalk. Now we make sure the charges stick. Every count. Every year of sentence possible. I meant for you. After this is over. I looked at the Denver skyline, lights twinkling like possibilities. For 16 years, my life had been about survival, about documenting abuse while enduring it. Now, for the first time, I could think about actually living. I don't know, I admitted. But for the first time, that's my choice to make. The emergency exit door of the Grand Hyatt opened one final time, and Richard emerged in handcuffs, flanked by officers. The red exit sign cast its familiar glow, the same crimson light that had witnessed him slapping me just weeks ago. Now it illuminated his downfall. Camera flashes exploded. Denver Post, Channel 9 News, even a CNN stringer who'd picked up the story. Richard tried to duck his head, but there was nowhere to hide. His empire, built on my mother's money and my grandmother's legacy, had collapsed in 12 minutes of slideshow presentation. Mr. Keene. Any comment on the poisoning allegations? Did you murder your first wife? How long have you been stealing from your family? He said nothing, couldn't even manage his usual smooth deflection. As the officers guided him past the red carpet he'd walked so proudly just hours earlier, our eyes met through the chaos. In that moment, I saw it, the recognition that the girl he'd systematically erased had orchestrated his complete destruction. Harper. He tried to lunge toward me, officers restraining him. Your mother's heart condition is real when she dies. It'll be your fault you killed her with this stress. Detective Martinez stepped between us. Mr. Keene, anything you say can and will be used against you. I'd advise silence. But Richard couldn't stop. The mask had finally shattered completely. She was nothing, a burden I gave that family class. Respectability. You gave us fear, I said, my voice carrying across the crowd. You gave my mother poison disguised as heart medication. You gave Aiden entitlement instead of character. And you gave me 16 years of evidence that will ensure you never hurt another family again. They dragged him to the police car. As it pulled away, I noticed the small things, his monogrammed cufflinks catching the streetlight, his Italian shoes scuffed from struggling, the Construction Excellence Award invitation still peeking from his jacket pocket. He'd been so certain of his control that he'd planned to attend tomorrow's ceremony. Aiden's transport followed minutes later. Unlike his father, he was crying not from remorse, but from the realization that his free ride had ended. No more failed businesses funded by my grandmother's money. No more Tesla. No more Aspen trips. No more safety net woven from my mother's inheritance. The lobby clock showed 12:58 a.m. when the last police car departed. The gala's ice sculptures were melting upstairs, champagne going flat in abandoned glasses. But down here in the lobby, justice was being documented in triplicate. Mavis handed me a final form. Sign here. This transfers immediate access to your grandmother's trust fund back to you, pending full restoration after trial. My hand didn't shake as I signed my name. Harper Lane. Not Harper the Invisible, Harper the Burden, Harper the Outsider, just Harper Lane, survivor. The forensics team will have results within 48 hours. Detective Martinez informed us. If the pills in Richard's office are what we suspect, he's looking at attempted murder charges for your mother, and possibly murder charges for his first wife. How long? I asked. How long will he be gone? With everything we have, federal fraud charges, state assault charges, potential murder charges. He'll die in prison, Harper. He'll never hurt anyone again. The words should have brought relief, maybe even joy. Instead, I felt empty, not disappointed, just finished. The war I'd been fighting since I was 18 was over. Dr. Harmon called from the hospital. My mother was stable but critical. The blood tests had confirmed digitalis poisoning, consistent with long-term administration. She'd been dying slowly for months, maybe years, while Richard played the devoted husband. Does she know? I asked. Yes, she's asking for you again. Tell her. I paused, searching for words that didn't exist. Tell her I'm glad she'll survive. That's all I have right now. Sylvie squeezed my hand. That's enough for tonight. As we prepared to leave, Marcus appeared one last time, tablet in hand. Harper, I pulled the full security footage, every angle, every moment, but there's something you should see. He showed me a clip from earlier in the evening, before Richard's speech. My mother at the main table, staring at her champagne, then looking across the room at me in my exile by the service entrance. For just a moment, her face had crumpled with something that might have been regret. Then Richard's hand had landed on her shoulder, and she'd snapped back to playing the perfect wife. She knew, Marcus said softly. Maybe not everything, but she knew something was wrong. She chose not to act on it. That's the difference between knowing and caring. 205 I finally walked out of the Grand Hyatt's front entrance, not the service door. Not the bathroom corridor, but the main doors that Richard had thought I'd never deserve to use. The December air bit at my face where the bruise was finally fading. The valet brought my car, my simple Honda, amid the Bentleys and Mercedes of fleeing gala guests. As I drove away, I saw the hotel in my rearview mirror, its lights still blazing, the scene of Richard's final performance. My phone buzzed with texts. Colleagues from Horizon Stone who'd seen the news. College friends who remembered my 3 jobs and ramen dinners. Even my father's sister in Portland. Your dad would be so proud. You fought back. At a red light on 17th Street, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I'd visit the house my childhood home that Richard had contaminated. I'd find whatever my father had hidden in the safe. I'd reclaim what was mine, not just financially but emotionally. But tonight, I drove to my small apartment in Capitol Hill, where no one had ever slapped me for not smiling, where no one had ever seated me by the bathroom, where no one had ever told me I was nothing. I walked through my door, my space, my freedom, and stood in the darkness for a moment. 16 years of hypervigilance, of recording and documenting and preparing, had led to this moment. Richard was in jail. Aiden was facing charges. My mother was in the hospital, finally free from slow poisoning. The trust fund would be restored. Justice, in all its imperfect forms, had been served. I didn't turn on the lights immediately. Instead, I walked to my window and looked out at Denver sleeping below. Somewhere, Richard was in a cell, probably still raging about the ungrateful stepdaughter who'd destroyed him. Somewhere, my mother was wrestling with the truth of who she'd married and what she'd allowed, and here I stood, no longer by the bathroom door or service entrance, no longer in exile or shadow. I stood in my own space, my own life, finally visible on my own terms. "I'm Harper Lane," I said to the empty room, practicing the words I'd say in court, and I refuse to be erased. The words echoed in the darkness, strong and clear and mine. For the first time in 16 years, I didn't check the locks twice. I didn't review recordings. I didn't plan tomorrow's defensive strategies. I simply existed, unguarded and unafraid, in a space where no one could hurt me anymore. Richard had been right about one thing. This was a memorable evening. The night his empire fell. The night my silence ended. The night I finally stepped out from behind the bathroom door and into my own life. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Your support means everything. And remember, your voice matters, your story matters, and you are never obligated to suffer in silence.